Hello, ho, ho, everybody. Adam Cleary from FourFourTwo here. Really sorry I forgot my Santa hat. And welcome to your little Christmas present. So the stands and the hardcores may remember that a little while ago we ran a poll on social media and we were like, if we could do one little tactical breakdown for you, what would you like it to be? And overwhelmingly, it was England Euro 96. And that's because, obviously, it was the last time we were collectively happy as a country, wasn't it? Just a mere 27 years ago. So we're just going to do a nice little video explaining why this team was so good, how it nearly went all the way to a final, why it's still such a thing in the minds of English football fans, why they love it so much, and also because it is loosely Christmassy. That's right, somewhere in this video there's going to be a very subtle reference to Christmas itself, and if you spot it, you win the prize. Anyway, here we go. Ho ho. Sorry. Right, so if I sat you down, bound your arms and legs, pressed a gun to your temple and said, quick, tell me what formation England played in 1996 or I pull the trigger, you would say, 4-4-2, please don't hurt me. And that is technically accurate. It was a 4-4-1-1, Teddy Sheringham sort of playing between Alan Shearer and the rest of the midfield, but it just explains itself. It's 2 fullbacks, 2 centre-backs, 2 centre midfielders, and 2 wide players. But this is not what Terry Venables wanted to do. In fact, there was a great deal of anxiety back in 1996 about what formation England were going to set up in this tournament as, because they hadn't really been all that impressive in the build-up to it. And that's because in the build-up, they had actually been playing this, the fabled 4-2-3-1, or the Christmas tree formation. There it is. That's the reference to Christmas. It's the word Christmas. There it is. Doesn't it look like a tree? There was no prize. Anyway, in this system, or certainly the version Venables envisaged, he had a fairly standard back four, the same as they were in Euro 96. He wanted Ince, Platt, and Gazza all as a 3 in the middle. Alan Shearer up top on his own, but in these 2 10 positions, no Sheringham. He wanted 2 from Redknapp, Barmby, McManaman, and Anderton. Now, if you're sat there thinking, hang on, you're going to have to repeat that, I wasn't really paying attention. You wanted 2 of his 4 wingers to play inside as 10s. Yes, he did. And the reason for that, and indeed the reason for this entire system, was because Venables had identified the areas England were particularly strong at and wanted a system that would suit how they played. And the most simple conclusion to draw here is that, yes, England did have talented players who could play wide, but they all preferred to come inside to do their work in the centre of the pitch. Redknapp and McManaman in particular had both started in that year's FA Cup final for Liverpool in the centre. Likewise, you had Darren Anderton, undoubtedly England's best crosser in the pre-David Beckham era. He occasionally would play in the centre for Spurs as well. He was a great chance creator in tight areas. Plus, and I don't know if you've heard of him, there was a young right back at the time called Gary Neville who was really sort of excelling in bombing all the way down the right-hand side and putting crosses in at pace from the byline, providing width. So if you just put all these ingredients together, you've got Gary Neville who can provide width down that side. You've got a back 4 who can shuffle across into a back 3 because Stuart Pearce is really happy playing there. You've got wide players who can come into the centre, and Gazza here, who was very good at floating out to the left-hand side. And you can sort of see where the balance comes from, can't you? And do you know what else you can sort of see here? The 3-box-3 system that, like, Man City and Arsenal and loads of teams are starting to use now. Now, England didn't play this way. He never ended up going through with this. If Venables didn't accidentally stumble upon the tactical innovation of 2022, like 20-odd years earlier. This didn't happen, but you can see the thought process. Moving your more creative players into the centre so they can control that area, getting width from unlikely sources in the team, allowing your back 4 to move across into a back 3 as the shape changes. There's all stuff that's just fairly common now, and obviously doing it back then is very different to how it's done today, just in terms of what it requires of the players. But it was innovative, and it wasn't really being done at this level or this boldly by anybody. But anyway, though, don't worry too much about this, because this is not how England played at Euro 96. This just sort of shows what Venables was thinking in terms of how he wanted to use his players. But if that's what he wanted to do and didn't, how did he take those ideas and put them in this 4-4-1-1? Well, in short, he worked with this England team and made them incredibly dynamic and incredibly flexible. Now, I'll explain this with the use of the Netherlands goals very shortly, but think about it this way. Every single one of the major attacking players, they had a job they were supposed to do, but they also had a secondary job they were encouraged to do. Certainly going to have a better go at explaining it than Jamie Carragher did on Monday Night Football that time. Jamie, mate, what is that? Why does it look unwell? So Steve McManaman, he was deployed on the right wing, so he would obviously do that job, but he would also just go and play as a number 10 whenever he felt the need to go in there. Gary Neville, as discussed, he was providing width from right back. He was pushing up way more than you were used to seeing an English right back doing at the time. Alan Shearer, he was the attacking focal point, but he would drift out into the right-hand side into the gaps McManaman left. Teddy Sheringham, playing just off him, would drop right into the midfield, sometimes even picking the ball up off the back four if that's where he felt he could get the space. Darren Anderton on the left-hand side, he would of course push up, but he would also fall back to allow Paul Gascoigne to get into that left-hand side. And Ince, the deepest of the two midfielders, was also encouraged to bomb into the box if he could do so untracked. And oh my god, it actually does look like Jamie Carragher's. No way. So you can see here, this is a complete and utter mess, but they knew what they were doing with it. It just became incredibly difficult for opposition defences to work out where to go and who to stay with and who to mark and when to get drawn out of position and when to just stay in the space. And England, all culminating in the Netherlands game, demolished them with this. So first off, the penalty comes from a long ball played right the way the length of the pitch from England's deep-lying playmaker with a radar-like passing range, Teddy Sheringham. Picks the ball up here, looks up, and who is bombing ahead of him? Paul Ince and Steve McManaman. McManaman, being the good right winger he is, receives the ball and moves into that right space, looks up to see one of England's buccaneering centre forwards charging into the box. Left winger Darren Anderton. His run creates a little pocket of space for the secondary attacking midfielder, holding midfielder Paul Ince, who was played in, and he goes over and he gets the penalty. 3 out of the 4 players in that move doing things you wouldn't really expect the players in their position to be doing. And I'm going to do this bit entirely as an isolated clip, just in case the FA are like, what are you doing? You can't put that on the channel, take it out immediately. Just watch this little exchange of passes. Look at who's in what position. Look at how comfortable they are on the ball. Look at how they just know that space is going to be filled by somebody regardless if that's their position. That was England in the 90s. Now, second goal's a header from a corner. It is what it is. But the third goal is not only one of the best goals any England team has ever scored at a tournament, it's just such a good example of how this system worked and how Venables was just a genius. Now, annoyingly, there aren't all the angles I want for this goal because TV was very different back then, so we'll just partly do it on the pitch and I'll partially do it with the video. So what should be jumping out at you immediately is that his right winger, Steve McManaman, has come all the way across into the central area with the ball. And the reason I've frozen it here is this is right before he makes the pass. Look at the respective body languages, is that the word? For Anderton and Gascoigne. Anderton is moving away from the goal because he was initially positioned high up. He's got the attention of the Dutch right back and is now trying to pull him out of that space to leave a gap. Gascoigne is running towards goal because he knows that gap is coming and he wants to be the player who fills it. Now just move it on a couple of frames, and fair play to the Dutch right back here. You can see he reads the situation quite quickly, but he has left that gap for Gazza to get into. Now this is a subtle thing, but if it wasn't for Anderton dragging him just a couple of yards out of position, he would come across to challenge Gazza, but he can't do that. So instead it's the right-sided centre-back who has to try and deal with him. Now again, just as a freeze frame here, if you're the Dutch manager, in an ideal world, you want your right back going to Gazza here, and you want the centre back looking after Sheringham, who's behind him. But that's not what happens, so everybody just has to shufty over one. Now, because they've done this well, Gazza is going to beat that central defender, meaning your other central defender here has a problem. He's obviously there, he's capable of covering for Sheringham, but he can see that Gazza's going to get through, and that's where the danger is. He's got to go to the ball. Gazza does brilliantly to draw him in as close as he possibly can before laying the ball off to Sheringham, basically taking that defender out of the equation, forcing the next and final Dutch defender to now come across. Just to recap where we are really quickly, right? This little bit of movement from Anderton out of his position takes the fullback out of the equation, and then the quality of the ball from McManaman, who is again out of position, he's come across into the central bit from the right-hand side. That takes the first defender out of the equation. Gazza, who has moved from his central position into the left-hand space Anderton came out of, is now taking the other defender out of the equation, leaving just one more Dutch defender to deal with Sheringham here, and Alan Shearer. As soon as the ball is laid off for Sheringham, there's nothing else this guy can do in the situation. He has to get across to try and stop the shot, which of course leaves Alan Shearer with probably the most time in a box, the most time and space any England player has ever had in a big game. Oh, and not to Columbo this, but just one more thing. Do you not think it's slightly weird that the play was all in this sort of space on the left-hand side, and Shearer's just so far over on the right? Well, that's because as soon as McManaman came across into this area here, it left that space open, so Shearer basically went and sat on the left back, just in case this happened. And then, you know what happens. Thump, wallop, pow, get in, 90s. And just to wrap this up nicely, because the fourth goal never gets a shout when people are talking about this game, Alan Shearer takes the ball here and he decides to lay it off to the on-rushing attacker. Is it Paul Gascoigne? No, it's not Paul Gascoigne. Is it Paul Ince? No, it's not Paul Ince. It's Darren Anderton coming off the left wing to receive the ball in the middle and shoot with his right foot. All three of those goals are just like living time capsules to how important movement has always been in football. If you were able to do it unpredictably, if you were able to do it like aggressively, if you were just able to just never let your opponent settle, you can beat anybody. It is also worth pointing out that England played a 3-5-2 in parts of this tournament as well. Like I think the Scotland game and parts of the Germany game as well, so that they could put Gareth Southgate in central midfield. Now, it's not relevant to any of the stuff I wanted to talk about today, but if we're thinking about how Venables was so far ahead of his time, ball-carrying central defenders moving into the middle of the pitch to allow you to have numerical superiority is like the name of the game in the Premier League right now, and that was something that occurred to him in the 90s. Now, obviously, defenders were different back then, and midfields were different back then. Just football, everything about football was very different back then, so it's not to say that, like, he was a crazy time traveller who could have just taken today's tactics and put them back then, but it goes to show, I'm rambling, it goes to show that the principles of what he was trying to do are the same as now. And it's so weird watching back those England performances at Euro 96, because if you followed England, the time between now and then, you sat through some absolutely minging football. Like, they were not good or tactically interesting or even just, like, flexible in any way. They were one of the most boring sides to watch on the world stage. And here they are, like in 1996, just running rings around the Dutch. And if there's one thing that doing this video has reassured me of more than anything, it's that England should have won that tournament. Not because they were on home soil, and yes, they were quite lucky with some of the decisions against the Spanish, but they were the best team at that tournament. Like, they were the best to watch, and they were the most fun, and they scored so many, like, just iconic, great goals. It's a real shame, that. And I will say, as just one final point, since it's Christmas and we should be trying to spread good messages, that it is just no coincidence to me whatsoever that the first time another England side looked like living up to both the achievements and as well just the philosophy of that 96 team, they are being managed by a player who was in it. And not just any player who was in it, by the way, a player who was clearly identified by Venables as special and also ahead of his time. Like, ball carrying centre-backs, of course they existed, they were big in Europe, but an English one, a small little man who could take the ball up the pitch, that was not the done thing. Venables wanted him in that team for a reason. So yes, there you go. That was nice and fun for me. Happy Christmas. That was my present to you. And if you enjoyed it, why not give me one back by subscribing to the channel? That is genuinely as good as some kind of gift voucher to me. In the meantime, though, the 442 socials, they are in the corner of the video. You can get me on Twitter to say something nice at Adam Cleary, Clery. And just, yeah, I will have recorded this a while ago, and it'll just be going out whenever you're watching it now. So I'm probably, as you watch this, petting a dog, hopefully, drinking some port, finishing off the Quality Street tin. You know, when it just gets down to, like, you want there to be a strawberry cream left, but you're just down to the toffee pennies. That's probably what I'm doing. But regardless, it'll be nice, because Christmas is nice, isn't it? In my opinion, I can't think how to end the video. Oh, God, I would normally retake this. But since it's Christmas, this is just me. Goodbye.